while we're waiting.
What's up, everybody? My name is Jonathan Schofield. My friends call me Scofie, and you have stumbled across another episode of Scofie Sessions. If this is your first time with us, Scofie Sessions is my shameless excuse to hang out with friends of mine in the industry, peers, colleagues, and folks that I just find plain fascinating. And then we pick a topic of choice, run down some rabbit trails, hop on some soapboxes, and hopefully we all learn something today to get together. And today's special guest is no exception, and I will introduce him here in a moment and give him an opportunity to introduce himself more thoroughly. But if you're joining us today or in the future on YouTube and you're watching this back later, say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, and please feel free to be engaged. This is meant to be a casual discussion today, and if you have thoughts or opinions or have questions for the experts, which we do have some experts with us today, don't be shy. All right. Today's topic, Mo people, Mo problems. Why MSP employees fail and how to fix it. So we picked a really spicy one today, James. We have James, the founder of, I'm going to say your business name wrong. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, James, and you say it right so I don't butcher it for you.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me today. The name of the company, actually, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a background on it. It's actually Kalutasan. That's the correct way to say it. That's a Tagalog word to say it, right? That's the correct pronunciation. But we decided that we're going to Americanize it day one. We're going to call it Kalutasan, which is how we pronounce it. Otherwise, we're always going to have to say, well, it's really Kalutasan. So we just said, let's just jump right in. We're just going to call it Kalutasan, knowing that we're pronouncing it wrong, but that is the name of the company. It's Kalutasan.
Okay, so actually I have to make a comment because I resonate with that story you shared on an existential level, because earlier this year, we rebranded our venture from Channel Falcon to Scofie. And for some context behind Scofie, Scofie is kind of a version of my last name, which is Schofield. And it was in college, my nickname was Scofie. And if you knew me in the fine arts world or in college, you knew me as Scofie. When we were going through this rebranding exercise, I kind of struggled with the spelling of it, because if it was SCHOFI or some variation of that, and to this day, Shofi, and even to this day, when people look at my last name spelled as it actually is, I get referred to as Schofield all the time. In fact, I don't even correct people anymore unless you're like in my life in a significant way, then I might correct you. But if you're just like, I'm at the DMV and someone calls for Mr. Schofield, I don't even correct them anymore. So I resonate with your decision to Americanize the pronunciation.
Makes sense.
James, we're so glad to have you here with us today. We're going to jump into our topic here very soon. But first, provide a little bit of your background and a little context for what it is that you do today. Don't go too deep on that, because at the end, we'll definitely give you the opportunity to kind of pitch your services as well. But Sheriff, let's get to know James a little bit today.
Great. Thanks again for having me. Really excited to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been hanging around the MSP community for quite some time. I started working first years ago. This is in the 90s. I worked for a VAR in New York City. I was working for Fortune 500 companies and deploying fax servers and working for these large companies. When I worked there, I got my MCSE, my CCNA, my CCNP, and then I moved into .coms. So I worked for a couple .coms and didn't make my fortune, and moved on from there. And after they went belly up, after the .coms went belly up, I said, hey, you know what? I think I'm pretty good at this IT thing. Let me see if I can hang a shingle. And we did. So with me and my wife, we started Terry Tech when it was the name of my MSP. We started this, over 20 years ago. And when we had babies, and we've since had 3 children that are somewhat launched. But we had it was essentially a break fix business that evolved into an MSP. And fast forward 20 years, with a lot of help and a lot of peers and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, we grew it into a $6 million business. We had about 25 employees, and we successfully exited from the MSP space in 2021. And recognizing that I wasn't ready to hang it up yet. Really like the MSP community. It's done so much for me and my family, and these are where my friends of the last 20 years are. Still want to do something different but tangential to the MSP space. So we started a staffing company that specializes in staffing for MSPs from the Philippines. So we leveraged Filipino talent when we had our MSP, and even through the our acquisition partner, and recognizing that the problems are still there and the challenges with MSP, and understanding the good things that leveraging outsourcing from the Philippines can bring to MSPs. We said, hey, let's continue on, and that's where we are today. We've been doing that for a couple of years, and it's going great.
What I love about this is that you're not just some outsider rolling into the MSP space, slinging around cheap talent without any understanding of the common challenges and obstacles facing most IT providers today. You've literally lived it in the trenches yourself, and learned from a lot of those real world experiences that led you to doing what you're doing today. So I'm excited for you to share a little bit more about that here in a minute. But hard to believe we're already 7 minutes into our time together. So we're going to transition into the topic for today. So why MSP employees fail and how to fix it. Obviously, this is a big thing to tackle in 20-25 minutes. Before we get started, if you're watching this right now and you are an IT provider yourself, right? And maybe you're not an IT provider, but you have strong opinions on this, you're welcome to chime in as well. But I'm particularly curious what your theory is here. First of all, if you are an IT provider, have worked for one, and you've seen this or experienced it firsthand, what's your answer? Why have you seen turnover in your MSP business? What are the most common reasons, in your opinion, as a viewer, that these things don't work out? And what do you think is the way to address it? James and I are going to wrestle with this a little bit today and hopefully get some value out of it. But I'd love your thoughts and feedback. Also, your questions. What do you think? Oh, what do you want to know from us? So obviously, we're going to take a wide berth at this, James, and we'll get a little more detail. But let's just start from the highest level. Let's talk about the status quo that IT providers are faced with when it comes to hiring, retaining, and empowering good talent in their MSP.
So I think we struggled with that, as does most MSPs, in terms of finding good talent, right? So we certainly know that there's no shortage of things that you need to do in an MSP. There's before the day starts, that 9 to 5, you have somebody that has to monitor the stuff in the beginning of the day. At the end of the day, you have patching, you have reboots, you have a ton of tickets, you have documentation, you have procedures, you have new things that you have to do in terms of cybersecurity, deploying a tool set, learning AI, deploying AI. So there's no shortage of things that you need to do, right? So, at least in my experience, if you have capacity in your MSP, capacity was always a dirty word. It means you're not making enough money, right? So you can always overhire. Yeah, you can get all of those things done, but then you're not making a ton of money. So, you kind of always wrestle with that as an MSP owner, so you have to do the most you can, with the resources that you have. So even the best run MSPs, with the best talent in the world, they have some turnover, right? Or you grow, you bring on a couple new clients, you bring on a few hundred seats or some servers or a project, and you need some extra talent. So what happens is you go and you place an ad, and everyone on this call that's associated with an MSP, you place an ad, you're talking to some recruiters, and there's not a ton of talent, right? You're having a hard time finding this talent, certainly at reasonable prices. And prices are going up across insurance and rent and 401k, and obviously salaries, and people are entitled to make more money. So how do you maintain profitability and service your clients and deliver on all the things that I had just mentioned? The answer is a lot of people fail at that, right? So then the problems exacerbate. You're not getting back to your clients. You missed that alert. You promised your clients you're going to be watching these things. Maybe you missed the backup. Your team, things are running hot. Tensions are starting to get hot. People are starting to burn out. Yeah, so MSP struggle with that, and I think it ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're up here, things are great, but the next day it can change. So how do you solve that problem?
So let's take a crack at solving it a little bit. We got Paul here in the comments who made a comment. He just hired a third-party help desk company. So that's one approach to addressing this. Paul, you just recently hired them. I'd be curious to hear what your experience has been so far, kind of what the status quo was you were dealing with before you hired them and what your hopes are. And just give us your raw impressions of where you think it's going to go. So that's one way of perhaps approaching it, outsourcing. So there's a lot of factors, right? There's a lot of factors, and I think you hit on some key points, right? So there's no shortage of activities that the IT provider is committed to fulfilling. And then there's other things that they want to fulfill. And then all comes down to the plan and how they're going to execute and how they're going to fulfill those things. And oftentimes what happens is you have a couple high value resources at your MSP that get tasked with everything. And you mentioned, burnout, you mentioned career path problems, people want raises, and then the profitability side of things as a business owner is always keeping you up at night. So what's the answer, James? Besides talk to you.
Right. I think there's a couple ways that you can answer that question. I think the first thing that you have to do in your business is you have to define what are your core deliverables. What does good look like, right? Because a lot of people, I don't think they understand what that is. Does it mean answering every ticket within 5 minutes? Does it mean getting back to my clients within 4 hours? Is it different triage levels of the important tickets? We're going to get back to them within X. Is it making sure that my tool set is 100% deployed across my client base? And then once you can decide what good looks like and what you're really going to commit to, do you have enough resources to do that? Do you understand the KPIs, the key performance indicators that are associated with delivering those products? And I think a lot of MSPs struggle with that. And look, I'm a prime example of that. And you and I were talking earlier, before this started. And there's nothing worse than a good example, because the guy across the street, he's doing it well. And he's like, oh, I missed the boat on that. So I certainly made that mistake, but I learned from a lot of peers, a lot of great people that ran, very successful MSPs. So if you can define those things, and you can develop processes around those things, and you can train your internal team, that's the first thing that you got to do, right? Number two, I think going beyond that, if you need to find talent, how do you find talent? Because you can certainly place ads, you can place them domestically, and you can try and find resources. We were finding that those roles were staying open for a long time, and we were having a hard time finding talent. Well, the problems don't go away in an MSP, right? Or not, I should say problems, the challenges don't go away in an MSP. Tickets will continue to come in, and you can have your team behind you. They'll rally behind you for a while, right? It's like, okay, we had somebody go on a vacation, or somebody's going to be out because their spouse had a baby, or you bring on a new client. You can say, okay, listen, I need everyone to circle the wagons, and we're going to solve this problem. We're going to do this, and you're 3 weeks into it. Okay, you're 5 weeks into it. 2 months into it, or having no solution at the end of this because you can't fill that role.
Yeah.
Does it wear well with your team? It starts to wear them down, and rightfully so. So how can you do this? Well, we found out that a good solution to that is outsourcing, and we tried outsourcing in a couple different areas. We tried Europe, and we tried South America, and we tried India, and it just didn't work with the MSP that we were running. And learned through our peers, some of these great MSPs that were my peers, they were outsourcing in the Philippines, and we tried it, and it was a home run, man. Um, the world is a much smaller place now than it was, yesterday, let alone 5 years ago. We're all listening to the same music, same influencers, TikTok, YouTube, streaming, Netflix, whatever it is. So the world is a much smaller place. Language, culture, work ethic, tech talent, it's all there, and we really found it in the Philippines. It's a home run. So we're finding killer talent with MSP experience, and this started when we were in our MSP days, from the Philippines, and you had to kiss a lot of frogs to find the prince. And back there we didn't have the method, or we weren't working with the right partners to find that talent. But we've been able to do that through Coludus and finding this great talent to place at MSPs.
So I'm curious because I've had mixed experiences with nearshoring or offshoring. And I have many partners who have also had mixed experiences. Some who will make claims like you just did, and like, man, it was a home run. It was absolutely the play and was worth every, bit of resource we put towards that initiative. And others who are like, man, I've had like 4 or 5 different people cycle through my business that were outsourced resources for this function or that function. And nothing seemed to stick. I didn't get out of it what I was hoping. What are when you're talking to an MSP and they're toying around with the idea of outsourcing and the problems they're trying to solve for, what are some red flags that you hear and listen for, like you can predict within a marginal, with an acceptable margin of error, that they will fail in their initiative? What are the red flags that you listen for when you're talking to an MSP where you're like, man, maybe outsourcing is not for you?
I would say when we're interviewing and we're speaking with MSPs, if it's getting to the point that they're actually placing talent, I'm not necessarily looking for red flags of where they would fail, because we're not necessarily turning people away. However, I have a ton of experience in running a successful MSP. So I think things that we make aware to them is really, you got to look at yourself first a little bit. And we say this, as almost like a business consultant or MSP consultant, and we offer those along the way. But you have to understand, what are they really there to do? Where does their job start? Where does it end? What are the hours that they're going to work? What are the expectations? Do you have good documentation? Do you have people within the organization that can be their buddies, their mentors? Do you have good documentation? So it's not as though we're holding the hands to the fire to say, hey, look, if you don't have those things, you're probably going to fail. We're not going to be a partner. Rather, what we'll do is we'll help them look at their business, and we'll say, these are the things that are going to ensure success. So before we'll place somebody, we'll make sure that we have those conversations, make sure that they understand that.
No, I love that. What you said earlier about, well, what does good look like? Have you defined those key performance indicators? What does success look like in the role that you're hiring for? One of the things that I've noticed when I'm talking to MSPs and they mention to me they're considering outsourcing, they'll say, well, I've been thinking about bringing on a virtual assistant, and I want this person to do cold outreach for me and to manage my social media, and I want them to manage my calendar, and the litany of things that they say after I want this one VA that they're going to spend pennies on the dollar for, is they go on to describe the functions of multiples of teams of people, and they're putting that burden of expectation. What does good look like? Good looks like this one person is going to run my business for me and be able to anticipate all of my needs, and with little to no oversight or management from me. I've heard that. They wouldn't say it exactly that way, but that's the impression that I'm left with when I hear them talk. I'm like, oh, wow, you're putting a lot on this idea of a virtual assistant being the answer to a lot of the problems you have. Have you seen those types of things where they're coming in, as like a desperate, man, I hope this solves my problems? What do you tell them when you feel that way?
So yes, we do see that. I feel like let's just talk about help desk, right? I feel like in help desk, most MSPs have evolved enough to understand what good looks like, and that's they have to know, and it's different for every business, right? So you have to know, is this person going to be in level one, level two, level three? How many tickets per day is your help desk team getting? What's typical resolution? Do you have escalation paths? Things like that. And I think most MSPs have evolved to that level. Certainly the ones that we're talking with, if they're reaching out to us, they're usually at that level and they have a pretty good idea. So, but to your point, it's sometimes people say they have unreal expectations and they say, oh, this person's going to essentially, be my outsourced business operator, right? You have to reel them in. I just had that conversation this morning in terms of, especially like, because we have people that are doing inside sales and generating, appointments and drumming up business for MSPs. But one of the conversations that we'll have with them is, what does that process look like right now? Do you have that process? Do you understand what that looks like? Because that's an area that a lot of MSPs struggle with, business development, and they expect that they're going to hire somebody, or they think that they could hire somebody, and this person's just, it's going to rain meetings. It doesn't work
Mm,
that way. Look, I mean, you have to have a list, you have to have a CRM, you have to have categories of clients, you have to know how to get through Gatekeeper. You have to set the number of meetings. Probably have to have some LinkedIn activity, some LinkedIn campaigns. You have to do follows. Maybe it's direct mail. Then PS, you have to do role play with this person. You have to do coaching. You have to have one-on-ones. What's the messaging? So all of those things have to happen, and it usually comes from the business owner, or maybe if they're large enough or sophisticated enough, you have a business development manager that can play that role. But if you're that MSP of 10 people and this is going to be the business guy or girl, we're going to outsource that, it ain't going to work. So
mhm.
we just bring them back down to earth and make sure that they understand that. And as long as that they're going to commit to that they will do those role plays, that they will meet with them several times a week. They'll review the activity, find out where they're struggling, listen to the calls that they're making. Okay, then we can start there. But once you start to have conversations like that, I think it resets the expectation to something more realistic.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that you said that. I've often made there was a very important word you mentioned. As long as they're willing to commit to that, this idea of commitment, and who's responsible for the success of your employees. Are your employees responsible for their own success? To a degree, yes, they have to take personal ownership of their new role and do their part. But if you're the captain of the ship, okay, and you are bringing people onto the ship, and your expectation is they're going to help you sail the ship. They're looking to you as the leader for the direction, but not just that, the resources and the attention required for them to be successful. And so if you're ever looking at human capital as a band-aid to a problem in your business, then and it's a reactive thing, like let's throw warm bodies and resumes at this business problem we have, you can almost certainly predict failure in that initiative, because you need to rewire your brain. Like, bringing people in, at least on the front end, may actually, in fact, initially be more work and more commitment for the business leaders who are responsible for the hiring and managing of those folks than it would have been if you continue to do it yourself. Unless you already have documented processes and procedures, key performance indicators, and a proven track record of what success looks like in the role, then it's more like, hey, let's hire the right person, plug them into the already existing thriving ecosystem, and support them as they advance through what's already defined. But if this is your first foray into bringing someone into your help desk, or especially your example of business development, I personally have incredibly strong opinions on that. If you've never run a successful team before, there's no reason to expect it's going to be easy, and that apart from you, they will be successful. That's personally how I feel about it and what I have seen. What are your thoughts, James?
So I think you said that very well. And I think what you just said about business development, you can apply that to really any area of your business. And look, I've made that mistake and I know, and it's not always easy to admit, but sometimes you'll have an employee that doesn't work out. And if you part ways, at the end of it, you might reflect on it and you say, hey, look, okay, maybe 10% was their fault. Or, they dropped the ball and they really didn't do the things that, we set forth for them to do.
Mm,
But in reality, they were never really set up for success. So you have to own that. So I
that's
think
true.
you said that well. Business development happens to be a great example of that. But you can apply that to any area of the MSP business: help desk, proactive, TAM, VCIO. And you have to have process has to be developed
That's
before
right.
you can expect that somebody is going to be successful in that.
I think where there may be some disconnect, especially in smaller IT businesses where the founder has been the one responsible for driving so much of the business growth and so much of the services delivered, like has had a direct hand in almost every facet of the organization developing, that person by sheer definition and reality is 100% through and through an entrepreneur, right? They are an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur is hard coded at the DNA level to create something from nothing. So they started a business perhaps without a playbook, without any defined processes. They had an idea and an opportunity to pursue, and they jumped headlong into it. Now, who has the most to lose in that kind of venture? The entrepreneur himself, his or herself. Who has the most to gain? Once again, it's the entrepreneur. The moment you start bringing people around you, there's two types you can bring into your business. There's fellow entrepreneurs, and they either are going to be folks you cannot afford, or they're going to require some kind of stake in the business, or they're going to have some kind of meaningful connection with you that is outside of a salary. Or you're going to have what the rest of us have to hire or get to hire. And these are people that need to be led, that need processes and procedures, that need an example set for them, that need what success looks like defined for them. And you, as their manager and leader, to partner with them in their development and growth. So, personally, that's what I've seen. Like, the MSP founder has high technical acumen, high business acumen, and they don't understand when they hire this entry level individual why they need their hand held so much, because I never did. I was able to build this business to 3 million in revenue without hiring a single salesperson. Why can't you book 2 meetings a week? It's like, well, man, we're not comparing apples to apples anymore. In my experience. What do you think?
That's right. Yeah, so I think, and look, I don't think one is right and the other is wrong, and I think businesses need both kinds of people, right? Because there's people that are perfectly happy on the support desk. They want to come in, they want to deliver excellent customer service, they want to be the best at that role, but they want nothing to do with, designing the next system or, you know, uh, um, exploring new technology or I don't know if that's a great example, but you need people like that. And I've been so fortunate to work with so many of those people in my MSP. They were awesome at that. They could deliver and they were key to our growth and customer satisfaction and client retention and all of those things. But then, there was, I guess you could call them entrepreneurs, I guess it may be entrepreneur spirit, but those were the guys and girls in the organization that probably grew the most. So one guy in particular brought him in. He was a help desk, started out on help desk, but then ended up being a wonderful VCIO and helped with business development, and had several other roles along the way. But the thing that made him so great was, I mean, he was hardworking, but he had like an entrepreneur's mind, and he was always looking to innovate, and they would create opportunities. So I think you have to be open to that in your business too. I'm thinking of another guy too, from a technical standpoint. This was obviously a long time ago, but they're like, hey, this Amazon Web Services is a really cool thing. Let's take a look at this. Oh my gosh, look at all this online storage. Let's virtualize all of our servers. And I didn't do that. Like, I mean, it got to the point where I hired great people
That's right.
and with that entrepreneur's mindset. And it's really cool about that. Obviously, they're delivering tremendous value to you and your organization. And I just posted something about this on LinkedIn today. Very proud that we created these opportunities for these folks because it really grew them professionally and grew their careers. So,
100%.
back to your original point of, you need some people that are task oriented. They're going to be awesome. They're going to deliver at that. Equally important is, the other folks, and maybe you call them entrepreneurs or not, but you need them both in your business.
Yeah, whatever you call them, folks that have an ownership mindset or are willing to invest, or I should say not willing, are going to invest regardless of who their leaders are in themselves and their own professional and career development, et cetera, et cetera. And those are often, in my experience, the ones who, after they've had experiences like working with you, go off and start their own thing,
Yeah, we've seen it,
or
sure.
they're the ones who spearhead innovation in an organization. These are, like, I would say, the lateral thinkers who are stepping outside the box. And those are the ones who are typically most like an owner. And I think when an MSP is hiring, they often look for, like, how do I duplicate myself? And many to most cases, that's why their expectations with an entry-level individual who's being hired to fulfill a specific function, they're like, I thought I was hiring another me, and I hired somebody who needs incredible hands-on direction, or they really, really define systems. And if those don't already exist, man, I'm setting myself up for frustration and disappointment, and same for them. But on the other side of understanding who your people are, providing them the right systems and processes, and committing as their leader to their success, boy, it can really sing, can't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We've seen great things. We've launched careers, had a lot of fun along the way. It's exciting, to work alongside those folks. And yeah, absolutely. We've seen it both of them in our MSP and, with Kaludison as well.
So we're going to be wrapping up here. It's hard to believe we're already at 2:01 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be wrapping up here in a second. But just to recap for those of you who are watching and we're watching this back later, so your MSP does not need to be a revolving door of talent and constantly throwing resumes at business problems only for you and your employees to be frustrated and disappointed, and just a place where money goes to get lit on fire. There's a way that employees can be successful. And according to James in our conversation just now, it starts by defining what does good look like, documenting processes and procedures, and committing to bringing, when you bring people on board, that you're going to give them the investment and resource and commitment and time to see them be successful. There's so much other nuance that we didn't have time to dig into, like culture and like leading people, what it means to be a good leader of people. So maybe there's a part 2 in our future, James, because there's so many other juicier things that I know we didn't get time for. But I'm so grateful for you being with us today, James. As we wrap up, I'd like you to share with our viewers just briefly more about Kaludison, what you guys do for IT providers and others, and the best way to get a hold of you. Then we'll go ahead and wrap up the stream, and we'll play a little outro video for folks to follow us on other platforms.
Great. Thank you again. By the way, that summary was so good. I suspect you had AI running. Did you read something? Because it was really good. That was a good summary.
I wrote my poorly written notes. But yeah.
Well done. Well done. I'm impressed. But yeah, thanks again for having me here. And we'd love the opportunity to speak with MSPs. And, obviously this is going to sound self-serving, and I guess on some level it is, but I really think that every single MSP should have a component of their business that's outsourced. The world is a much smaller place now. The risk is low. The upside is so high in regards to early morning, after hours, alerts, help desk, documentation, inside sales, marketing, virtual assistants, contract prep, licensing. So I mean, there's so many things that these highly talented, highly talented, highly articulate, hardworking, ethical, just wonderful people, wonderful workforce. We certainly know all the MSPs. I don't know your business specifically, but I know the challenges of an MSP, and I know, sometimes I talk to people. One woman in particular, I rattled off all of her problems. She goes, "This is amazing. You don't even know me, and you know my problems." I go, "I know, because I lived it for 20 years. I know exactly what you're looking for." So I know what the problems are. We've interviewed and sourced and placed so many people in our own MSP, and we're doing it for scores of other MSPs right now. That we would encourage you to have a conversation. Just think about it. There's lots of roles that can be filled. PS, rates are up to 70% less than domestically sourced. So creating great opportunities for folks in the Philippines as well. They can work from home. They can better spend more time with their family. They can deliver better service without having to commute, in some cases 2-3 hours each way. We look for great MSP partners that are aligned with who we are and our values, and we're always looking for somebody that is going to be set up for success in their MSP. That they're going to invest in this person. They're going to create career opportunities to help them grow. And when we're doing all those things successfully, we're delivering in spades. It's going well.
Beautiful. I love it. Now, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you, James?
Best way, you can send in email to info@kalutasan.com, KALUTASAN.com, or you can give me a call at 914-573-7923, or there's a contact us on our website, kalutasan.com. By the way, Kalutasan is a Tagalog word. It means solution. So that's how we came up with that name.
I love it. And I'm also going to drop your LinkedIn profile in the LinkedIn comments. Connect with James here. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to end the stream. There'll be a brief outro video that plays with a QR code and a bunch of other places you can consume this content or follow us on other platforms, wherever you would prefer. And we appreciate you all being here, and we'll catch you all in the next one.